Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Jeff Lawson. I'm here with Doug Wolfe today. Very excited to speak with Doug. He's with Yell Wolf Filmworks out in California. And I'm really excited to talk to him because he runs the business a little bit differently than I think some of us do. And on the other hand, it's probably very likely we're headed where Doug already is. So with that, I'll turn it over to Doug. And Doug, have you introduce yourself here as our guest on Signal Over Noise podcast.
Hi, thanks for having me, Jeffrey. Name's Doug Wolfe. I've been a television editor for the most part for 30 years. I started off at a local TV station in college and kind of worked my way into music videos and commercials, and moved from Athens, Georgia to Los Angeles in the 90s, and ended up cutting sitcoms and some reality shows, and kind of found my way into theatrical and television marketing, working for the WB network on shows like Dawson's Creek and Buffy the Vampire Slayer. And then I went to Fox and worked on 24 and Arrested Development, and then worked for a small boutique agency called Snore Media Studios, and we worked with like FX and ABC. I actually cut the original the original Star Trek promos for Paramount. That was really fun, kind of like making that old classic sci-fi really cool and everything. And then I went to NBC, where I was the writer, producer, editor for Sunday Night Football for 3 or 4 seasons. So we did all the big marquee spots. Worked on Jay Leno's 10 o'clock show when they took the Tonight Show and moved him, basically gave it to Conan, and then gave him a primetime talk show at 10. I worked on that campaign, and then I also worked on the campaign putting it back on the Tonight Show. Then ended up taking a job as a senior editor in Atlanta with Turner Broadcasting, and working with TNT on their marquee shows, and then ultimately moving back to LA and helped open the creative service division for Turner Studios back then, where I became senior editor producer. Back then they would call it a lead creative, which is just basically someone who was the liaison between Turner Studios and the Turner brands. And then it kind of blew up after that. After AT&T bought Time Warner, all those silos that Jeff Bewkes had created between Turner, HBO, and Warner Brothers were all broken down. We're kind of one big happy family. So then I started working with the other brands with that, where I became supervising producer in the creative service division, also editing, managed a team of 6, and then in 2023 there was some restructuring, and then I started my own company, Yell Wolf Filmworks, kind of a play off of Cry Wolf, but Yell Wolf. I'm trying to make it into a verb. We'll see if I can get there. But ultimately, I still work with Warner Brothers to this day. They're one of my clients, along with Fox and Masterclass. First Media is a client of mine. And so right now, what I do with my company is I just scale based off the client's needs. So I get a lot of people come to me who just want me to be an editor and work with the dailies and craft the narrative that needs to get done. And I've also I've done projects where I'll go out and hire a crew, and we'll do a full-blown production from concept to delivery. I wrote, produced, directed, and edited the Robot Chicken's 20-year special for Adult Swim. That was a great project. Got to work really closely with the guys from Stupid Buddy Studios at Robot Chicken, including Seth Green. And then I'll also work with a number of other marketing departments within the entertainment as well as corporate. So I have some clients who are agency driven, that work with major corporations like Home Depot and Delta Airlines, and they'll bring me in to edit and be a lead editor on some of the big corporate projects they have.
Got it. Long resume, terrific. As you were going through it, a number of things were exciting, but for you, which one was most enjoyable or exciting for you of all those? Can you tell us about it?
Yeah, I did a behind the scenes special for a TNT show called The Last Ship. And the show's, in case people who don't know it, it's basically it's based off of a book. It was a Michael Bay show. Stephen Kane was the showrunner. It was basically this U.S. Navy destroyer went out in the Antarctic, turned off all communication due to some drills, and when they turned all the communications back on, the world was in this pandemic. I mean, pretty timely considering that several years later we were in one. And
Sure.
the world was coming to an end, and this was basically the ship that was going to save the world. Well, I can remember when I got asked to like come up with some concepts to pitch to TNT of what we could do. I kind of wanted to get away from the traditional behind-the-scenes special where it was like you talk about cinematography and set design and stuff like that. That stuff's great, but the thing that really kind of like clued me on was the biggest star of the show was the U.S. Navy destroyer. It wasn't, God, rest his soul. Eric Dane wasn't the big star. It was the U.S. Navy destroyer, in my opinion. So I kind of pitched that. Let's do a piece on the history of the U.S. Navy destroyer, because if you really kind of dive into it, it's an interesting lineage of how it started off as what they call a torpedo boat, and so it ended up like the evolution of that, especially after the Second World War. I thought was very fascinating, especially being a big history nut. So I had pitched it to TNT, and I had pitched it to the showrunners over on The Last Ship, and they loved it. They loved it so much that they reached out to the U.S. Navy, and I got to work with Captain Coombs, who was at the time, he's retired now, but at the time he was the liaison between the Hollywood and the U.S. Navy. So when Spielberg or Michael Bay wanted to do a project with the U.S. Navy, you'd have to work with Captain Coombs, and he scared me to death. He kept me honest the whole time. But they loved it so much, the concept, that I spent 2 days in San Diego at the Navy base shooting it. I got to interview Vice Admiral Rowland, who at the time was basically the number 2 person in the U.S. Navy. He controlled 70% of our fleet. My understanding was 70% of our fleet comes out of San Diego. So, and it was just great not only to learn about the history of the destroyer and work with our servicemen, but I got to spend 2 days with them and learn their culture, and learn how they have a process for everything, and the efficiency of that, and what is expected, and being accountable. And I kind of took those lessons and use it to my everyday life in my professional life. And so that, to me, the project I'm very proud of. When Captain Coon saw it, he told me, he gave me the best quote. He goes, "If we could have this in every high school in America, we would have a recruitment rate like we did when Top Gun came out in the 80s. I was like, that's a hell of a good compliment. But that was the big takeaway for me. Not only having a great creative project that I could execute with the support of the U.S. Navy, but also just learning their culture and how I took lessons from their world and brought it into my everyday life.
Very neat, very interesting. So you've had a lot of different experiences, a lot of different companies, a lot of different people. Describe for me your ideal client, an ideal client based on all those good, bad, and indifferent experiences.
To me, it's kind of a two-part answer, because sometimes I really appreciate clients that know exactly what they want. Like, this is what we need done, and I go and knock it out for them. And then I enjoy clients where it's like, what do you want to do? Let's talk about it. Like, let's grab a coffee. Let's jump on a Zoom call. Let's figure out what we want to do. Let's play in the sandbox a little bit. I think I've gotten very used to kind of like being able to pivot the creative based off the needs of the client and where it's ultimately driving. But as long as they're very clear, good communication, it's kind of flexible with stuff, because I've had situations where there were things out of everybody's control, and ultimately, they get frustrated with it, and I understand that. But for me, it's just good communication. Just a client that's really good with communication, and honesty. Like, I think sometimes people come to the table where they feel like they have to know everything. And I gotta tell you, most projects, I'd say 90% of the projects I've done over the last 30 years have never really come out the way that they initially did. There was always some variation. And so I'm very much into having my eyes open during a project, because I think opportunities kind of pop up from time to time, and you're like, okay, that's a cool idea. Let's see if we can elaborate on that, right? and just being able to pivot and kind of test it or audition it, as you could say.
So over the last 2 or 3 years, how is the business changing from your perspective?
My perspective is Hollywood's rebuilding itself, the entertainment brands. I think I've noticed budgets have drastically changed. There's mass layoffs. The LA market is saturated with extremely talented people. So that affects us in a lot of different ways because, quite honestly, the salary or the rates that we once got aren't what they were because there's people who are trying to take jobs. I know producers who work at the Apple Store, and I know producers who work at Trader Joe's because they're not getting work. I feel very grateful that I think the fact that I not only have been an editor, but I've also been a producer and a director, and I've also write stuff that, I think my asset as an editor for a project is I can wear those hats and I can look at my edit from different perspectives and kind of like see issues that may pop up and not just cut something together and be like, hey, what do you think of that? And let the producer give me feedback. I look at it also from a producer's point of view and like, what am I missing? The industry is just kind of rebuilding itself. And I think once all these mergers happen and the dust kind of settles, and I personally feel we're going to see some more mergers. I don't know which studio is going to buy who, or which streaming service is going to buy who, or which hedge fund is going to buy who. But it's like I think ultimately we're going to see a couple more years of this, and then once the dust settles, but the traditional old school Hollywood television and theatrical world, I think is gone. I think you have a whole new generation now that watches their entertainment on TikTok and YouTube. I have a 20-year-old and an 18-year-old. And that's their primary source of entertainment. Our my 20-year-old son watches a couple shows with my wife and I. We're always watching stuff on YouTube and we're watching TikTok videos, and that's the next evolution, I think, of entertainment. I think there will always be a place for premium content, but for right now, I think Hollywood's just trying to figure out where they fit in the new habits of the audience.
What makes Yell Wolf Filmworks unique or different from the folks you compete with?
To be honest with you, it's just we have no overhead, so our budgets go farther. It's I know I'm able to scale production based off the need. So everything from writing, producing, directing, editing, graphic design, visual effects, color correction, all of that. Like I've got a Rolodex of people who are beyond talented, who work for the biggest studios and networks and design houses, and so it's like I could take a budget that at one time would be, I would think, considered extremely low, and we're able to elevate it up because I don't have to I don't do this overages and production charges and all that stuff because at the end of the day I just I get a producer fee, and that's kind of how I look at that. And then, part of that job as a producer fee is to go to my DP, and I have a couple DPs who I use, and they put together their crew. So it's very much like, the model of that's the department head, they hired her. And I think that's the thing about Yell Wolf is like, and we're able to pivot and scale production based off the needs of the client within the budgets. I think ultimately that is something we have to be prepared for. I do think we're seeing it now. I'm at Trailer Park, a major staple in the theatrical television entertainment marketing, laid off, I don't know how many people, but they laid off a bunch of people several weeks ago. Their AV division film, I believe, and it's like that's very telling. I have friends who work for agencies who have downsized and consolidated with other agencies just to kind of keep the lights on. I think this day and age, it's about having a good reputation, having good relationships with people, and bringing them value for the most money. On the flip side of that, not to get ahead of ourselves, I think now with AI being such a strong tool in our industry, that's going to be even more attractive to clients because it's like we don't need to do $100,000 shoot. We can create everything in AI if we want to. Now, personally, I don't think we're quite there yet. Like when I see AI stuff, it looks great. It's amazing. I get it. But I do think it's missing some humanity to it. But as for little things like making my post-production workflow more efficient, it's great. Going ahead and throwing ideas on a whiteboard and getting some feedback, because the one thing I do miss about going into an office every day is working with my fellow producers and collaborating and throwing ideas, and someone knocking on the office door down the hall and be like, hey Doug, I got an idea for this Cartoon Network promo, whatever it may or may not be. What do you think about this? Oh, great. What if you did that? All right. And then there's this back and forth. And then I like to think that person left with a broader, more options for the creative than he did before he came to meet me. And I think working alone a lot, AI has been great about just bouncing ideas off of.
In a previous conversation, you characterized yourself as a one-man boutique. Frankly, I haven't been able to get that out of my mind. What are the challenges of being a one-man boutique?
Convincing people you are. Like when I left Warner Brothers, they brought me back immediately as a vendor, because those executives I worked there at Warner Brothers Discovery knew what I was capable of doing. So once we kind of did the dance together and I was able to provide them with a product, like, oh, Doug can do it. He can do it. He can give us a high-level, well-produced product for fractions of the cost of what it was several years ago. Now, it's part of technology, but it's also the fact that I, as an editor over the last, especially the last 15 years, have had the opportunity to write a lot and been able to direct, and it was really just out of necessity back then. And it's convincing people that I can wear many hats. But at the same time, I'm comfortable with someone coming to me. There's a project coming up right now with an old colleague of mine who has his own production company, and he just wants me to cut for him. You know, you're one of my favorite editors. I'd love for you just to cut for me. You know, I don't need you to produce. I don't need you to do this and that. And I know what? I love it, because I don't have to go produce and chase down footage and deal with lawyers. Like I can just be like, you know, let's get this through DNA and all this stuff. Like I love that. I love that. But that's been the biggest challenge, is convincing people you can do everything. And, you know, and I do understand why there's a hesitancy, because this generation of executives have been brought up that this is the box you sit in and this is the box that you
Sure.
control. And I get that. I was brought up with that. But I was also put in situations where if I didn't get behind the camera and hit the record button, it wasn't going to happen. I learned how to run cameras. You know, I'm pretty solid on, by no means am I a DP, but I can do a basic light kit, and, you know, especially in EBK, and put on some nice prime lenses and have depth of field and know those little tricks, because I sit back and watch really good DPs do it, and I was like, oh, that's where he puts the key light.
So what prevents you from doubling your income next year?
I mean, for me, it's just getting the projects, you know, and that's something that I've had to learn in the last 3 years, is the hustle. I've always worked for a studio. I've always worked for a network. I always worked for a trailer house. You know, I'd come in Monday through Friday and weekend work. But for me, I think the biggest hurdle for me is just the hustle and getting the relationships and having people trust you. It's just getting in the door is the challenge. And I understand that, because they have people that they've used for the lifetime of their career. And why wouldn't they not use them? I respect that. I get that. You know, I have clients that I've known since I'm doing promos for the WB network, and those guys have gone off to have running divisions now, and they bring me in because it's a 25, 30-year-old friendship or relationship. Mm-hmm. But I've never been great at hustling, I don't feel like. I think I've gotten better at it, and I don't try to overstep. I don't try to be annoying. If I get the impression someone doesn't want to work with me, I just back off, because it's like I don't want to fill someone's inbox with random emails. It's like, I respect that, you know, but that's been the bigger hurdle, is just getting in the door and giving people projects that I can do.
So how are you leveraging AI to make Doug more productive, or extend Doug, or to complement Doug?
I use a lot of it for audio. I've created some video. I played with it enough to like have fun with the prompts and see what I could do. And, you know, I have 3 pit bulls, so I created them with wings, because I teased my mother-in-law that my dogs wings are gonna pop out of their back and pick her up and fly her off to the beach, which it's an inside joke. But it was fun to be like, okay, how can I take, you know, a gray, black, and tan pit bull, give them wings, and make them look like, make them look loving, but yet fearful. So I played with the video aspect of AI. Yeah, but when it comes to audio, I use a lot of 11 Labs. I think it's great. What I really love about it is I use it for scratch video a lot because I don't like hearing this voice when I'm cutting all day. So if I'm writing copy,
I got you.
And I have fun with it too. Like I remember I did a political ad where I was playing with the idea of using a man and a woman to kind of like sell the message, and they really loved it. They thought it was a great idea. They thought it added definitely some scale to it. And fortunately for that spot, they actually went and hired actors to do it, voiceover actors. So I love that. But to get the concept out, that's been great. Cleaning up audio somehow or the other. There's always this to be an audio issue from time to time. So getting in there, cleaning up the hums, cleaning up the crackles, cleaning up someone touching their mic on their lavalier mic on their chest and getting that sound. So that's been great. It's a great tool.
Well, I think that pretty much covers it. I have one more question. I call my podcast Signal Over Noise to really get at what matters. As you're kind of looking at the video, filmmaking, marketing, just communication space, do you sort of feel things that maybe other people are missing, or maybe just sort of downplaying that you think really are important for a business person, a creative like yourself moving forward, that you'd like to sort of underscore or point out for the world to say, hey, pay attention to X because this is where the world is going. I just feel it in my bones.
Pivot. Gotta be able to pivot. And like I've been pretty good at looking at the landscape of, and I can only speak with entertainment because I've been doing this since I was 21. I was in college when I got into this business. So prior to that, I did not have a real corporate job. So I've always been good at seeing what is the trends down the line, and not just from a creative point of view, but just also for where things are going to go, and just position yourself to be that. I start off as an editor, and I basically pivot based off of the need of the production or the lack of support we had with something, and just stepped up. So I've always been, I think, very good about that. It's just paying attention to trends and being able to move with it.